This video covers the IGCSE Biology Objective 4.1.2c on the 2025 CAIE syllabus to state that large lipid molecules are made from smaller molecules. So now we're looking at fats, the third type of biological molecule that you need to know about. So first of all, let's take a look at what lipid molecules are used for. So first of all, lipid molecules can be used for the storage of energy for long-term use. I already talked about this, and so some fats can be used for energy storage, and so that usually happens in the liver. The liver is one of the major organs that does a lot of decision making for the types of molecules that we put in our body. It decides if it's going to keep it or get rid of it and how that's going to happen. Lipids also form protection of internal organs, especially in the abdomen where we don't have a solid bone structure like we do in the thoracic cavity to protect the heart and lungs. Our abdomen is exposed, so there is some protection. It's afforded some protection by a slight lipid layer. We're not talking huge amounts here. That's unhealthy, but just a small amount of protection. Lipids also form structural components of cells. I've talked about this before when we were talking about osmosis and the formation of cell membrane, but there are fatty acids or lipids in the cell membrane structure itself. Remember, it is a phospholipid bilayer. And so those little legs or tails that we see there are actual lipid components. Additionally, the production of hormones, the way hormones are formed, come from lipids. So you've heard of cholesterol, that's a hormone. You've probably heard of progesterone and testosterone, those are hormones. Those form from lipid structures from the foods that we eat. And finally, we have insulation. Now, the insulation can be on a cellular level, such as on a neuron. And when we learn more about coordination and response, we will learn more about why the cell has insulation on it. And also, our mammalian bodies have a layer of insulation directly under the skin. And again, when we talk a little bit more about homeostasis and temperature control and our skin, we'll learn more about this layer of insulation. But all of these functions come from lipids. So let's just talk about the lipid subunit. So the lipid subunit, or the fat, is made up of two basic parts. It's made up of something called a glycerol and then 3 fatty acid tails. And that's typically a lipid subunit. Now, those fatty acid tails can either be a saturated fatty acid tail or an unsaturated fatty acid tail. So remember, saturated means that every carbon has a hydrogen chemically bonded to it, and an unsaturated fatty acid tail would have less hydrogens bonded to carbons because there are double bonds that exist between some of the carbons in that chain. Now, there are lots of names that are going to sound the same when we start getting into a lot of these names. And so we've already come to the first one that sounds similar to something else that we previously have learned. We learned about glycogen. Now remember, glycogen is animal fat. It is storage of animal fat from carbohydrates. This is not to be confused with glycerol. Glycerol is a component of a fat molecule. Okay, glycogen is formed from carbohydrate molecules. So you just need to make sure that you know the difference between those two words and what type of molecule they come from and what their use would be. And we'll get into that a little bit later.